The New Orleans Saints may have passed on quarterback in round one, but that doesn't mean they need to act with any desperation in the second day at the position. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Mel Kiper got it wrong. This is the most important day of the New Orleans Saints NFL draft. And even though the team passed on quarterback, it doesn't mean that they need to act in desperation here in day two. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. The New Orleans Saints passed on quarterback in round one, exactly the way that we expected that they would, but that doesn't mean that they need to act in desperation here as the second and third rounds come along at the position. I was asked before, on a scale of 1 to 10, shout out to my good friend Joey, how much I feel like the New Orleans Saints need to face the urgency, right? How urgent should the New Orleans Saints be about going after a quarterback when quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, Louisville's Tyelr Shough, who we know the New Orleans Saints are big fans of, Alabama's Jalen Milroe, who you know I'm a big fan of, all remain on the board along with other guys like Will Howard of Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel of Oregon, and other passers too, Kyle McCord of Syracuse, yada, yada. And my answer on a scale of 1 to 10 is 0. The New Orleans Saints don't need to have a sense of urgency here. In my opinion, the New Orleans Saints are best served waiting to see who's on the board at 40. I am not a huge fan of this quarterback class. It's been no mystery, although I do like Shedeur Sanders. I do like Jalen Milroe. But I'm not enough of a fan of this quarterback class to say that the New Orleans Saints need to go and trade up for a passer. And clearly the NFL is not that big of a fan of this quarterback class either, which is exactly what we expected. And so for the New Orleans Saints, who now extend their first round quarterback drought in the NFL draft to 55 years, last time they took a quarterback in the first round was Archie Manning in 1971. We should also note that they have never taken a quarterback in the second round of the NFL draft in their franchise's history. That doesn't mean that it can't happen here, but it would still be a bit of a surprise. It would be a different kind of path than what we've seen this franchise take for its entire history. For the record, they've only taken one third-round passer as well. That was Garrett Grayson back in 2015. That worked out great. That was sarcasm. The New Orleans Saints could very well take a quarterback here, but the way that I think that they should do it, because I can't advocate for them trading all the way up to go and grab a quarterback, right? They didn't trade up in the first round. One of our final predictions, along with the Kelvin Banks Jr. selection, was that the Saints would try to trade up in the back half of the first round and wouldn't be able to get it done. Sounds like that's exactly what happened. And that is no surprise, because you had teams like the New York Giants who were able to trade up for their quarterback to compete with in terms of that move up, while you sit with the 40th overall selection. And so New Orleans, in my opinion, should just sit back. You have the Cleveland Browns picking like 17 times before you. You have the Las Vegas Raiders. Neither of those teams took a quarterback in the first round. They absolutely have the opportunity to take a swing at quarterback here in the second round. The Cleveland Browns have some tight selections back to back with one another, or around each other, and they could go Shedeur Sanders. If they don't go Shedeur Sanders, they could go Jalen Milroe. If they don't go Jalen Milroe or Shedeur Sanders, then certainly the Las Vegas Raiders could go for one of those guys as well. There's a good chance that if the New Orleans Saints really like all three of those quarterbacks, which I know they like at least one of those quarterbacks, maybe two of those quarterbacks, then you're probably sitting pretty at pick 40. So my recommendation for the New Orleans Saints, because Mickey, I know you're listening, is to sit back at 40, figure out who the best player available will be on the board there. There are so many good players left on this board, and all you got to do is make it from 33 to 40. You're going to get a good player at that point. See who the best player available is. If that best player available on the New Orleans Saints board, not the media consensus boards, not the latest mock draft, not the average draft pick on your favorite mock draft simulator, which isn't actually about anything but how the public mocks picks. If the best player available on the New Orleans Saints board is a quarterback that they're truly willing to throw a stamp of approval on with a first-time head coach and tie that head coach to this quarterback for their future, then you take that quarterback. But if the answer to any of those things is no, not your top player at best player available on your board, not the quarterback that you would put your stamp of approval on, not the quarterback that you would want to pair with your first-time head coach and tie them together, because that's the way the NFL works, whether you like it or not as a coach. If the answer to any of those things is no, pass. Pass. Take the best player available, regardless of the position, and build your team. I'm not even advocating for playing for the 2026 draft class. Couldn't care less about the 2026 draft class of quarterbacks. Couldn't care less about the 2027 draft class of quarterbacks. The New Orleans Saints have a premier opportunity here to build their team, and they have other needs. Left guard could still be a need depending on what they plan to do with Trevor Penning, depending on what they plan to do with Dillon Radunz, depending on what they plan to do with Kelvin Banks Jr. You could potentially find somebody that helps you there. Cornerback, you need a starter. There are several potential starters in this year's draft class at this area of the draft. Wide receiver, still a position you could go to. Tight end, still a position you could go to. Edge rusher, defensive tackle, defensive line, still a position that you could go to. Not in that order, but certainly all of those positions are addressable in round 2 and in day 2. However, if there is a quarterback that you love at pick 40, if there is a quarterback that you love, that you feel like you have to get ahead of at least the Las Vegas Raiders to be able to select, then make that move. But it has got to be a quarterback that you love. It's got to be a quarterback you think you can't get at 40. And it's got to be a quarterback that you're willing to tie your new head coach to. And again, if the answer to all those questions is yes, make your move. Otherwise, wait until 40. Wait to see if the answers to the other questions are yes. And if not, take the best player available, and you're still doing a good job building out this roster. Coming up next, this is the day that will decide the New Orleans Saints 2025 NFL Draft. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, the absolute best place to go if you're looking for a job. Also, the best place to go if you're looking to post your job as well, especially if you're a small business owner. Did you know that 72% of small businesses love LinkedIn? They say that it helps them find highly qualified hires. That's exactly what you want for your small business. Your small business is only as good as the people that you have around in your culture that's helping you run the business, all those other things, helping you execute your mission. So you want to make sure you're hiring the right people. That's where LinkedIn comes in. You post that hashtag hiring frame to let everybody know that you're hiring. Post to your network as well as that expansive and incredible LinkedIn network that's out there as well. Millions and millions, billions and billions wide. You can go and check all of that out today. And best of all, you can do it all for free. You can post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family. This is the day 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft that will absolutely decide the New Orleans Saints draft class. Is it successful? Is it not successful? All comes down to today's, we'll call them 3 selections for now. We'll see how that stands for the New Orleans Saints as they move ahead. The New Orleans Saints have 1 second-round selection, pick 40, and then they have 2 third-round selections, pick 71 and 93. Why do I think that this is the most important part of this New Orleans Saints draft? Well, it's the best part of this draft. This is now in the area where the difference between who the New Orleans Saints took at 9, or could have taken at 9, and did take at 9, versus who they take here throughout today, the gap's pretty small. Everything that we've heard from people of multiple teams, multiple areas, executive to scout, all over the place, is that this draft class is stacked in the middle with starter talent. And that the difference once you get past those top 5 or 6 players and the 50th, 60th player, there's a difference, but it's not as steep a drop as it typically is. So for the New Orleans Saints, this next set of 3 selections, unless they move around, ends up being the most important part of their draft. If they land 3 starters today or tonight, then they end up in a phenomenal situation as they move forward. Even though the draft grades at the end of the draft class will say otherwise, the New Orleans Saints have a real opportunity here to end up building out their roster around the quarterback position and potentially addressing the quarterback position. This is the other reason why I think that the day 2 area of the New Orleans Saints NFL draft is going to be the day that tells the story of the success or failure of the NFL draft, is because some people are going to decide whether or not this draft class was a success or failure based on 2 things. One, did they take a quarterback? Did they not take a quarterback? Some people will believe that if they took a quarterback, it was a failure. And there are some people who believe that if they didn't take a quarterback, that it was a failure. The second thing is, which quarterback did they take? And that will change everything as well, because people either like this quarterback or hate this quarterback, or like that quarterback and hate that quarterback. It all kind of depends on who the quarterback is, if the quarterback is taken, all those other things. That will be the story of the New Orleans Saints NFL draft. But here's the truth. The other truth. Even if the New Orleans Saints do take a quarterback, even if they don't take a quarterback, they can walk away with 3 bona fide starters in today's picks or with today's selections. And so I want to go over some of those things as we move forward. So let's say the New Orleans Saints do or don't take a quarterback, whatever. There's additional selections. I want to take a look at where the Saints can also go in other positions. We talked about some of those other places where they were, where they have needs, right? Kellen Moore's mantra of building from the inside out and winning in the trenches ended up completely predicting day 1. It's what kind of opened up the compass for us to figure out where this team was going. And so now I'm curious whether or not Brandon Staley's mantra of this being a line of scrimmage game, which he continuously said or talked around or talked about in his pre-draft interview with WWL Radio, might predict what's going to happen in day 2. So thinking about that, I want to start in the trenches on the other side, edge rusher and defensive tackle. Now, there are excellent selections here. Some of my favorites, Boston College edge rusher. I want to start with edge rusher. Boston College edge rusher, Donovan Ezieruaku, 6'2", 246 pounds, twitched up athlete, 16.5 sacks last year for Boston College, led the ACC, 21 tackles for a loss last year for Boston College, led the ACC. I think that he's a phenomenal pass rusher. And one of the things that Brandon Staley was talking about was having athleticism on the edge, being able to counter today's outside run games, but also be able to better defend today's quarterbacks, which are mobile, can get out, can scramble, can create, can improvise, play that playground type ball, all that kind of stuff. You want an edge rusher with some athleticism that will be able to kind of put a cap on that. And I think a guy like Donovan Ezieruaku could certainly be that. Princely Uman Mielen, out of Ole Miss, a guy that I've been on for a long time when it comes to mock drafts and all those other things. A little bit of a bigger guy, 6'3", 6'4", 250, 260 pounds. Might even have gotten up to 270 by the time you're hearing this. Who knows? Guy that can stand up and rush. Guy that can put his hand in the dirt and rush. Gives you a little bit of versatility as well in 3-4 and 4-3. Even 5-2 if you want to go that route with 5 defensive linemen in certain situations. He gives you a lot of versatility in terms of your ability to be able to use them all over the place. And always shows up in clutch moments. He was huge in that Ole Miss game going up against Alabama, showing up at the right time. Pair of sacks there, some of his best work that he's done as a pass rusher throughout his collegiate career, showing up at the biggest moments. I love seeing that in a young player. A young player that can show up in the big moments, that's huge. You look at guys like Mike Green, who's still available out of Marshall as well. Obviously somebody worth paying attention to. I believe 17 sacks, if I remember correctly, last year. Insane production. Going to the interior side of the trenches, the New Orleans Saints did not go with one of the guys, or will not be able to go with one of the guys that I like so much in this year's draft. That's Tyelr Williams, the Ohio State defensive tackle, who I think is one of the few players that you drop into any defense across the NFL, and he makes your run defense better. But he's off the board because of the Lions. Come on, Dan. So I go back to Old Faithful here. Deion Walker, Kentucky, defensive tackle. Maybe not necessarily round 2, maybe more round 3 conversation there, but 6'7", tree fitty. I like him a lot. He's somebody that ends up plugging up that middle, changing the numbers for you, helping you out there. Now, Saints have a ton of defensive tackles, so maybe they don't even bother with this in the draft, but just another thing to consider, because that was one of the other pieces that Brandon Staley constantly talked about, along with it being a line of scrimmage game, win in the run game and force that opposing team to be one-dimensional. And another guy that would help you do that would be Omar Norman-Lott, the defensive tackle coming out of Tennessee, another big-bodied guy, not as big as Deion Walker, but nobody is, but can still help you out in all those areas. If the New Orleans Saints don't go back to the trenches on the defensive side, they could go corner. This is something we've seen the New Orleans Saints do a ton. In the last 10 years, 10 drafts, the New Orleans Saints have spent a day 2 pick, round 2 or 3, on a defensive back 6 times. And 5 of those times were all second-round selections. Last year, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Slightly before that, you look at Alontae Taylor. You go back to Marcus Williams, Von Bell, Stanley Jean-Baptiste. That's 5 in the last 10 years, dating back to 2014. So could the New Orleans Saints make it 7 in 11 years? 7 of 11? I think it's very possible. Trey Amos, the corner out of Ole Miss. Will Johnson has fallen from Michigan. We thought that might be the case. Medicals, speed, big question marks there. So maybe not a great fit for New Orleans. It also maybe goes off the board pretty quickly at the top of day 2, so might not even be there at the time that the Saints get on the clock at 40. You look at Darian Porter coming out of Iowa State, one of John Hendricks' favorite guys. Shevon Revel out of East Carolina, a guy that the Saints had a top 30 visit with. If his medicals are clean and are more clean than Will Johnson, then maybe he could be the selection at pick 40. Wide receiver, still a spot to watch. Jayden Higgins out of Iowa State. Can we get it? Can we see it? That would be great. Tight end, if they decide to go that route, Mason Taylor out of LSU, did a lot of work on him over the course of the offseason. Doesn't have to be round 2, could be round 3. Travion Henderson, running back out of Ohio State. If they don't want to go Travion Henderson because they want maybe a bigger body guy, Quinshon Judkins, also Ohio State, 3rd round. Lots of different ways for this New Orleans Saints team to go. Bottom line, the New Orleans Saints have the opportunity to change the trajectory of their franchise today. By either taking a quarterback or not taking a quarterback, but nailing the 3 selections in today's NFL draft. Let's see if they can get it done. Coming up next, Mel Kiper got it wrong. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here, and that means that FanDuel is making sure that they're giving all new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So put it down on a heavy favorite. Maybe you really liked the big time hole that the Thunder were in, got in on some live betting too. Lots of different things that you can do over at FanDuel, but put it down on a heavy favorite on the money line. If you walk away with that win, you get a little bit of Skrilla because you're winning the actual bet, but then you walk away with $250 in bonus bets as well. Hope you didn't put money down on Shedeur Sanders to the New Orleans Saints, by the way. Yeah, lots of, you can check out NFL draft props, NFL win totals are already up as well. Go and check it all out. You can find all of it. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Mel Kiper got it wrong when he was talking about the New Orleans Saints' 9th overall selection in Kelvin Banks Jr. Now, of course, Mel Kiper, one of the most respected draft analysts out there, but this felt weird. Like him coming out and saying something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, that Kelvin Banks Jr. did not have a great year at Texas was very strange to me. Saying that you had to go all the way back to 2023 to really get an idea of the type of player that he is, to that injuries and things like that really got in his way in 2024. And so I went through and just kind of doubled back, and I thought, maybe I read about the wrong guy. You know what I mean? Maybe I read about the wrong Kelvin Banks Jr. Maybe I looked at the wrong stats, right? Maybe I looked at the wrong information. Maybe everybody else's scouting reports were wrong that I checked my scouting reports against. Maybe my eyes failed me. Maybe I got something wrong here. I didn't. Mel Kiper did. Kelvin Banks, 6'5", 315 pounds, reportedly did not have a good year at Texas in 2024. What did he do at Texas in 2024? Well, he was a consensus All-American for the 2nd time, by the way. Team captain. He also won the Lombardi Trophy For those of you that don't know, the Lombardi Trophy is delivered to the best offensive lineman / defensive lineman in college football. And the Outland Trophy was the other one that he won as the best offensive lineman in college football. That doesn't sound like a bad 2024 at all, does it? Surrendered just 4 career sacks, including only 1 last year. That sack surrendered to Jalen Walker, who he may now face twice a year, as he is now a member of the Atlanta Falcons, drafted at pick number 14 overall. Side note, not a bad year. Yeah, you can go back to 2023, but he had a similar performance. Had an even better performance in 2024. Over the course of 2024, he surrendered just 5 pressures in the last 8 games of the season. 1 of which a hit, 4 of which all hurries. And only 1 of those instances were multiple pressures in a single game. Absolutely dominated Will Anderson during his rookie year. I know it's not going back to 2024, but it's a fun side note. What about the injury history? According to Mel Kiper, he had some injuries that kind of held him up. I don't know about holding him up. Again, he was a consensus All-American, team captain. He became the first offensive lineman taken out of Texas in 22 years. The last Texas offensive lineman taken in the first round was number 4 overall in 2002 to the Buffalo Bills. Anybody? Nailed it. Mike Williams, you're so smart. But how about those injuries? 42 games that he played, despite just being 21 years old, literally having just turned 21 last month. 42 games of experience over the course of 3 years. And by the way, each one of those starts. So injuries held him up. He must have missed a lot of games. He missed a single game his entire career as a football player, as far as I'm concerned, because you go all the way back to high school, didn't miss a game there either. Missed 1 game, the SEC championship game up against Georgia. He had a left ankle injury, tried to go, couldn't do it. Got injured during a Texas A&A game, tried to go and get back on the field, couldn't do it. Made all those starts at left tackle, by the way. And then he said, as he told us in his post-draft Zoom media availability with New Orleans media, he told us that he played through that injury for his teammates because he knew how much he meant to the team, how much he meant to the offense, and how much these moments going into the college football playoffs, which, mind you, came after the SEC championship game that he missed with that left ankle injury. And by the way, he performed well during those games. He went out there and he played for his teammates. Steve Sarkisian, the head coach of the Texas Longhorns, said to Dane Brugler, Dane Brugler has a quote from him in his draft guide about Kelvin Banks. And then Steve Sarkisian sent a similar quote to the New Orleans Saints, which was shared with New Orleans Saints media, where he basically said that anytime that anybody comes to him and asks what they need to do, how they get better, he said, be like Kelvin. That's the guy that, let me check my notes here, didn't have a great year at Texas. Curious. Very curious. It's funny. I wondered at a moment, I was like, is Mel Kiper talking about the wrong player? But then he said at Texas. So he clearly did, unless maybe he was thinking Connor Williams. Maybe Connor Williams was a guy at Texas that was like high up on everybody's list, looked like he might be a first round pick and everything, and then got into this year and then kind of fell off. He was a guy that we looked at one point last year when we were doing sort of early mock drafts. We were talking about, Will Campbell would never fall to the Saints and all those other things. Turned out that was true. But Will Campbell will never fall to the Saints. And so we need to look at other players that could potentially be there. And he was a player that had kind of fallen off a little bit. Cameron Williams, not Connor Williams. I apologize. You were just yelling that at me, weren't you? Ross, you idiot. I don't blame you. Yeah. So maybe Cameron Williams is who he was thinking about. It's the best that I could do. But either way, like, mad miss, Mel. Mad miss, bro. But hey, look, we all make mistakes. What was it that I did so many times? I kept calling Cliff Kubiak because it was like the Cliff Kingsbury, Clint Kubiak thing. And you know, who knows all the stupid things I've said and probably been wrong about and everything like that. So I'm mostly giving him a hard time for the sake of being able to talk about Kelvin Banks again, because I think it's a good pick. But man, it was such a funny moment. And it was so like right. It felt so right that would happen with the New Orleans Saints pick too, where it would just be like openly kind of like disrespected in this strange way. and so clearly talking about the wrong player. But, great draft moment. Almost as good as Kelvin Banks' baby throwing up on live national television. That was pretty funny too. Look, I wanted to revisit the Kelvin Banks selection here before we wrapped up today's show because I do think that he's an excellent prospect. I'm really interested to see how it is that the New Orleans Saints go about things on their offensive line. Do you just simply demote Trevor Penning to being a depth player? Do you try to move him inside? Do you start Kelvin Banks on the inside, knowing that you're not going to pick up Trevor Penning's 5th-year option, and so take him into the contract year, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, take him into the contract year, and then see how things work out. And then if you don't feel good about him after 2025 or during 2025, then maybe you shift Taliesin Fuanga over to right tackle and then put Kelvin Banks Jr. over at left tackle. It's going to be really interesting. But what I think that Kelvin Banks Jr. gives you the opportunity to do is have 5 of your best offensive linemen. Because maybe from the very beginning, Trevor Penning's not one of your 5 best offensive linemen. Dylan Radins is. Kelvin Banks is. And so you move Fuanga back over to right tackle, where he played his entire collegiate career, even though he was a stud at left tackle. And then you plug in Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, where he played 42 games, was the Outland Trophy winner, was the Lombardi Award winner, was a consensus All-American in 2024 for the second time in his career. Maybe you do that. That's the thing that I like about this pick, is that it gives the New Orleans Saints the opportunity to figure out who their 5 best offensive linemen are and put those 5 best offensive linemen in front of whoever the quarterback is going to be in 2025, who we assume will not be Derek Carr and will likely be some young quarterback, either a rookie drafted this year or second-round quarterback Spencer Rattler, who was drafted last year. Or maybe the Saints surprise us all and they spend $10 million in free agency to sign Aaron Rodgers, but I don't see the Saints going that direction. So we'll see. This is an important day for the New Orleans Saints. I think this is a day that makes or breaks this year's NFL draft, and I can't wait to talk to you all about it. We'll be live later on after the New Orleans Saints make their selection in the second round, and then probably live even later in the evening when they make all of their selections post Kellen Moore. We'll see how things go in terms of rhythm, but we'll be here every step of the way through. Thank you so much, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.